Many companies still approach ESG as a mere regulatory requirement. What elements differentiate a compliance-driven approach from a truly strategic one? Could you please provide an example?
Well, this is a very difficult question, in fact, but it's pretty straightforward in a way I want to answer. Number one, you follow compliance because you want to minimize the risk. You want to be to adhere to law and to regulations, and you want to make the minimum effort, so the minimum cost, in order to provide disclosure about your business. That is, of course, a very bureaucratic accomplishment and a bureaucratic mindset that underpins this sort of going forward. On the other side, if you want to consider ESG as a strategic lever, well, you do embed that, integrate that into your business model. So that, number one, in the other scenario, only legal and administrative functions respond to regulatory compliance. On this side, you got everybody on board, from innovation to HR, to marketing, to product definition, to operations. Everybody's there, from the board downward. And this is very difficult to achieve on one side, but it's very fulfilling when you do achieve it, because it definitely transforms the business and provides an edge, a competitive edge to your company. To make an example, and there are many out there, Enel, the electricity company, has transformed over the past several years its business model into a fully digitized entrepreneurship operation, where the grid, for instance, is fully digitized, and this has led to minimizing CO2 emissions. They have walk the path of renewables energies. And so it's not only regulatory that they have in mind, but it's how to transform the business model. Two examples more. Coffee companies, one is in Trieste, Illy Cafe, which is absolutely a best practice in regenerative agriculture, and Lavazza, that is very much engaged in the social part of the supply chain, helping farmers and others. There are many, many companies out there that have understood how to drive ESG, environmental, social, and governance, as elements of their sustainability strategy into their business strategy model.
Let's talk about the supply chain challenge when achieving ESG compliance. How can an SME manage ESG monitoring of its suppliers without incurring excessive costs? Are there any technologies that can facilitate this process?
SMEs have a problem, their size, the resources they have at their disposal, when approaching ESG matters. There is a problem with ESG sustainability when you have to report on it. Data collection. You only own a fraction of the data that is needed to describe your business. And this data comes into different sources, into different formats and shapes and natures and units of measure. And therefore, integrating all this can be daunting. Large companies have a much more structured approach. They have the resources to do this. And in fact, even the legislation has started addressing large companies. SDRC, for instance, from the European Commission, will start with the top tier of large companies, 50,000, just about around Europe. But those companies, in fact, have as suppliers most of the time small and medium-sized enterprises. So SMEs are forced in a sort of domino effect to be part of the game. Now, how do you do that? If you do it by yourself, which is one of the shortcomings of Italian mindset, for instance, piccolo e bello, this is not true here, because you need to cluster, get together, even with your, I would say, would-be competitors sometimes, but especially with your suppliers, in order to create a sort of cluster effect, this swarm intelligence, which basically will come at a fraction of the cost. If you do it by yourself, you will do it partially and will cost a lot. If you do it with others, you will minimize the cost and will get a much better result. So cooperation is one. Two, of course, number two, as a component, well, cooperation implies platforms, digital platforms. You're handling data in the end of the day, and you can't handle data if you don't have a platform. A digital platform, they come in many formats, and there are many available out there, but it's not only a digital platform, it's also a sort of a cognitive platform that you have to build, which has been done or is being done now in sectors like fashion, for instance, automotive and others, energy and others, where people have understood that full supply chain need to cooperate in a sort of ecosystemic approach in order to provide the elements that pertain to each one of the members. Each one by themselves will make a huge cost and sometimes not coherent rendering of the situation. If you get together, and this is why this sustainability approach is so important, because you get ecosystems together and you start thinking in a sort of ecosystemic way rather than each one for themselves, which is basically a total Copernican revolution in the mindset and in the way industrial relations are managed. Third point, I would say, is that you need a common culture. A common mindset understanding implies that you have the same sort of feelings and understanding. If you dismiss sustainability as a bureaucratic matter or a burden, you can't cooperate at the same level with others that do perceive sustainability as a strategic lever. So you need to adapt and you need to come to a compromise. And this will sort of sieve the goods from the bads. And I'm using goods and bads within quote marks, of course, because there will be companies that will be ready to jump on board and companies that will not be future ready, and they will have problems.
You describe ESG data collection as a puzzle. Indeed, gathering ESG data requires integrating information from different systems. How can this be managed in practical terms?
Well, yeah, as I said before, data comes in different nature, different formats, different units of measure. So you need to collect all this. The problem is that administrative systems, ERPs systems, are not designed to handle ESG data. So ESG data is totally different. It's completely different. So you need new platforms, new pieces of software. Well, you would say, you need another information system. Wow, that's very expensive. In fact, you need new functions rather than a new information system. You need to complement your administrative functions, for instance, with data that pertain to the definition of what a product is in terms of CO2 emissions, for instance, or sustainability, or disposal, or waste management, or whatever, okay? Clearly, it has to do with the way operations are organized in the companies. So each company has to collect the data for themselves. Platforms do exist to help in this task. This can be a daunting task, as I said, but as platforms exist out there, IBM and Visi is providing one. SAP is building the Green Ledger. It's still to come. They have a more, I would say, administrative flavor to that. There are others that are coming together. There are very good Italian solutions. I'm not going to sponsor anyone, but there are very good solutions out there. If you go and check the web, you will find them. These platforms help, using also artificial intelligence sometimes. They help you use the data, get a coherent representation, a systematic collection approach, so that data comes in a way that is interoperable, understandable, comparable, in quality and with quality. And this is the future. And clearly, there are companies that have jumped on board and are already taking that stance, and companies that are behaving like laggards. The problem with SMEs is that since they normally don't have resources, and I mean not only money or technology, I mean competence, knowledge, if they get together, as I said before, they need to get together in order to overcome this daunting task.